The danger didn't start with a scream. It started with a vibration, a violent one, the kind that rattles glass and punches through silence like a warning. My phone shook across the table, so hard it almost fell. 3 weeks after the wedding. 3 quiet weeks where the world pretended nothing was wrong. Then this violent shake, this sound tearing through my house like it had claws. I snatched it up. "Ma." The voice on the other end cracked, breathless, jagged. "Ma, I saw something extremely shocking. Come immediately and don't say anything to your son." The air around me collapsed. It was the event planner, but not the calm woman who handled chaos with a clipboard and a soft smile. This voice was shredded, terrified, shaky, trembling like something had scraped the courage right out of her chest. For a full second, I couldn't speak. The silence in my living room turned heavy, like someone else was standing in it with me. This is where I tell you who I am. My name is Gloria Fields, and I'm a mother who has learned to recognize true fear when I hear it. The fear in that woman's voice was not about decor problems, payments, or misunderstandings. Something darker was sitting behind her words. You sound scared," I said, my hand already closing around my keys. "Is this about the invoice? I sent the—" "No." She cut me off with a shake in her voice that made my chest tighten. "This isn't about money. Ma'am, please come. Come alone. And please don't bring Jalen." Goosebumps rose along my arms. Her whisper cracked. "I shouldn't have waited. I should have told you that same night." That same night. The wedding night. My gaze drifted slowly, almost unwillingly, toward the framed wedding photo on my console table. Nia glowing, joy radiating from her skin. Jalen standing proud beside her, face full of love. But in the corner of the frame, something I had never truly looked at, Jalen and Reginald Dawson, standing shoulder to shoulder, faces turned toward each other in a way that wasn't father/son-in-law casual. A closeness too intimate, a look too knowing. A coldness crawled into my spine. "I'm on my way," I whispered. Before I stepped out, the planner's voice cracked through the phone again. Raw, broken, terrified. "Ma'am, hurry. If you're still here with me, just drop a little heart in the comments so I know I'm not walking back into this alone." The drive to her office blurred past me. I don't remember the traffic lights, the turns, the distance. All I remember is her voice echoing in my head, each shake in it tightening my grip on the wheel. When I arrived, she wasn't waiting inside. She was standing outside, pacing, breath hitching, hands trembling so violently she kept grabbing her own elbows like she was trying to hold herself together. The moment she saw me, she ran toward my car, not walked, ran like someone chasing salvation. Her fingers latched onto my wrist before I even stepped out fully, dragging me inside her office. The blinds were already closed, the door already locked. She checked the lock twice. Her breath came out in short bursts, shaking harder with every inhale. "Tell me," I said. She swallowed hard. Her chin trembled. She kept staring at her phone like she was afraid touching it would set off an explosion. "It's about your son," she whispered, voice barely holding shape. My heartbeat stumbled. "It's about Jalen and his in-law." My mouth went dry. Her eyes filled. Fear, guilt, horror. She stepped closer, her voice thinning until it became a breath. What they did behind that reception hall. She covered her mouth, as if she couldn't bear to say the rest. Lord Jesus! I almost fainted when I saw it. A cold, electric silence wrapped around us. Whatever truth she had caught, it was about to destroy the marriage I had just celebrated. Her words hung in the air between us, thin and trembling, as if even sound was afraid to touch what she had just implied. I felt something inside me tighten, a cold thread stitching itself through my chest. The planner, Keisha, didn't give me a chance to steady myself. She reached for the lock again, twisting it until the metal clicked with a finality that made my skin prickle. Then she grabbed her phone with both hands, the way someone holds an object they regret carrying. Her fingers shook so badly, she had to wipe them on her jeans before unlocking the screen. She didn't speak. She didn't breathe. She simply pressed the phone into my palm and stepped back like she needed distance from the images she was forcing me to see. The first picture lit up. My knees nearly buckled. Jalen, my son, pressed against Reginald Dawson behind the floral arch, hidden just enough where guests wouldn't see. Not a hug, not an innocent brush of closeness. A kiss, firm, deliberate, secretive. Reginald's hand cupped the back of Jalen's neck, pulling him deeper into it. My throat closed so abruptly I had to swallow twice before air found its way back in. The room dimmed at the edges, as if the walls were leaning in to watch how I would break. I blinked hard, but the image didn't change. Neither of them looked drunk. Neither looked confused or stumbling. They looked aligned. Keisha touched my elbow gently, guiding my attention to the next photo. "There's more," she whispered, her voice barely hanging on. The second picture was somehow worse. The two of them in an intense exchange beside the storage corridor, faces inches apart, eyes locked with a kind of hunger and calculation that twisted something inside me. Reginald's lips were moving, whispering something into my son's ear. Jalen's expression wasn't resistant. It was eager, obedient. Heat climbed the back of my neck, then dropped sharply into my stomach until it felt like ice water filled me. Keisha stepped back again, wringing her hands. "I didn't want to believe what I saw," she said softly. I tried to convince myself it wasn't what it looked like. But then she gestured toward the phone, already trembling in my grasp. I caught them talking, and I recorded it. Her fear settled into the room the way fog settles into valleys, slowly but choking everything in its path. I stayed quiet because families like theirs can ruin people, she admitted, her voice cracking. Contracts, licenses, venues, your whole life can crumble if you step on the wrong toes. I was scared. My fingers tightened around the phone. "Show me the rest." Keisha inhaled shakily and reached over, tapping the audio file. A soft static hummed. Then voices filled the room. Jalen's voice. Reginald's voice. Hearing them speak without seeing their faces made it worse, like standing in the dark with a threat breathing in front of you. Reginald's tone was low, controlled, dripping with certainty. "Once she dies, the money goes to him. Then to us." The words slid into me like a blade. I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp. I didn't move. Inside, something cold and steady rose through me, an instinct older than reason. Keisha watched me with wide, fearful eyes. "There's more audio," she whispered, clasping her fingers together tightly. "But that was the part that made me call you." The recording continued faintly in the background, their murmurs shifting, deepening, almost plotting. But My ears had locked onto one line, echoing in a place I couldn't reach or silence. Once she dies. The phone vibrated in my grip, the audio still playing, but my focus had narrowed to a single point. The fact that this wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't just secrecy. It wasn't just a kiss. It was intent. And as Keisha reached out, pressing a trembling hand to my arm, the next piece of the recording rose just enough for me to hear it clearly, a soft, bitter laugh from Reginald and a whisper that froze the breath inside me. Everything is already in motion. The recording was still humming in my hand when Keisha reached out and gently lowered the phone, silencing the whispers before they carved deeper into my bones. Her eyes were bright with panic, but also something heavier, shame. She wiped her palms on her jeans again, unable to look directly at me. There's something I need to explain before I show you the rest. She murmured, I didn't call you sooner because I couldn't make sense of what I saw. I was scared, and I didn't want to believe any of it. I didn't interrupt. The room was too thick with truth rising to the surface. Keisha folded her arms tight over her stomach, as if she were holding the confession in place. The pictures, the audio, it didn't all happen the same night. That first recording, that was from the wedding day. But the second one, the one where he said everything was in motion. She paused, breath trembling. I didn't catch that until the following week. I was cleaning my equipment, going through backup files, and I found more than what I thought I captured. The 3 weeks stretched themselves out in my mind, suddenly feeling suffocating. I kept replaying all of it, she continued, trying to convince myself I misread it, or that it wasn't what it sounded like. But then I saw a news story about a newlywed couple who died on a honeymoon trip. It triggered something in me. Her voice broke. I realized if I stayed quiet, I could wake up and see Nia's name in the headlines. My breath hitched at the mention of my daughter-in-law. Keisha took a shuddering breath. That's when guilt settled in. And then, last night, I found another clip that made everything undeniable. That's why I called you today. I couldn't sit on it anymore. Someone could die. Her hands shook again. I steadied them before she pulled away. Show me the rest, I said quietly, my voice sitting low and anchored, though my heart slammed against my ribs. She unlocked the phone and opened a folder labeled private. A new set of documents filled the screen, scanned screenshots, and paperwork that looked older than anything from the wedding. This part isn't for me, she said. This came from a conversation I had with Nia's grandfather's lawyer. He reached out after the wedding because something seemed wrong on their end, too. Her finger hovered over a scanned document. Do you know anything about a sealed trust? Something left specifically for Nia? My lips parted slowly. No, she never mentioned it. Keisha nodded, sadness sweeping across her face. Her grandfather left her a fortune. Not just money, properties, investments, things that gain value over time. But everything was sealed until she married. And Reginald, he's been trying to access it for years. Cold swept down my spine. She clicked to the next document. He tried to petition the trust office 3 different times. They rejected him each time because he had no legal standing. She swallowed hard, but after Jalen proposed, the tone of his requests changed. He pushed harder, started acting like he had a right to oversee things for her benefit. Pieces began forming a shape I didn't want to see. Keisha continued. The lawyer told me Jalen only learned about the trust 2 months before the wedding. Reginald was the one who broke the news to him, privately. Not Nia, not her family. Him. A faint buzzing filled my ears. I steadied myself against the side of her desk. Another memory rose, unwelcome, but suddenly sharp. The night of the engagement dinner. Reginald leaning in too close, smiling too wide, telling me, if she needs help managing her assets, I can take the load off the kids. At the time, I brushed it off as him trying to impress me. Now it sat in my chest like a weight. Keisha placed the phone back in my hand. You need to know this next part before we go any further. Her voice fell to a whisper. Ma'am, they weren't drunk that night. They weren't confused or overwhelmed. Her eyes filled with dread. They were planning her death. The words settled like ash in the space between us. The air between us hadn't settled before Keisha reached for the phone again, her fingers trembling as she tapped a second audio file. The moment it opened, a low hum filled the small office. Then the sound sharpened into voices I recognized too well. Jalen's voice came first. Soft, uneven, breathing too fast. Dad, please, we need more time. He called him Dad, not Mr. Dawson, not Reginald. Dad. Something inside me pinched tight, but I kept my face still. I needed to hear every word. Reginald's reply came through with that sharp, deliberate calm I had always found suspicious. Time is a luxury we don't have. Once she's gone, everything defaults to you. And then we're set. Set. That word slammed into me with a coldness I wasn't prepared for. I pressed a hand to the table beside me, the grain of the wood grounding me as their conversation continued in clipped whispers. The audio caught the slight echo of the reception hall behind them, music, distant laughter, the muffled clink of cutlery. Life happening all around while death was being discussed inches away. Dad, I'm not ready, Jalen murmured. I don't want anything happening too fast. Reginald's tone tightened. You're hesitating again. I told you we follow the timeline. The sooner it happens, the cleaner it looks. A simple accident. Keisha stepped back, arms folded over her chest. This part, I didn't want to play it for you at first, but you need to hear it exactly how I heard it. She didn't have to press anything. The recording kept rolling. Reginald lowered his voice enough that I had to lean in to catch it. You make sure she gets that life insurance policy done before you two travel. Once that's in place, the rest will fall like dominoes. My breath hitched. A memory struck me with a sharp, bitter edge. Nia standing in my kitchen days after the wedding, twisting her ring with nervous fingers as she said, Jalen wants us to get life insurance before the honeymoon. I thought it was too soon, but he insisted it was just responsible planning. At the time, I told her couples do that all the time. Now the words sat in my stomach like stones. The audio crackled, shifting slightly as if someone moved closer to the phone. Jalen's voice returned, small, strained, carrying a fear I had never heard in him. I don't think I can go through with this. She trusts me. Reginald's voice hardened. And you trust me. Silence stretched in the recording. A thick, suffocating silence. When he finally spoke again, his tone was colder. Don't make me remind you how long I've guarded your secrets. Son, you owe me loyalty. You owe me obedience. My hand tightened around the edge of Keisha's desk until my knuckles throbbed. There was something wrong in his voice, an ownership, an intimacy that didn't belong between a man and his daughter's husband, a pressure that wasn't parental. Keisha watched me quietly, her expression softening with dread. The recording shifted again, as if one of them moved. Then Reginald added, "The retreat spot is perfect. Secluded roads. Bad lighting. One slip of the wheel, and that's it." A chair in the background scraped. Jalen whispered, "I just need time." Reginald snapped, "We stick to the plan." Keisha reached out and tapped the screen, pausing the file before the next part spilled out. The room was so silent I could hear my own pulse punching against my ribs. She swallowed hard. "There's more. But this is where I realized something you need to know before we go on." Her hands twisted together, knuckles white. "They argued later," she said. "Not in the recordings I've shown you yet. Another clip. Your son wanted to delay it." Her eyes met mine with a painful, heavy truth. He was scared of him, Mrs. Fields. Terrified. You can hear it in his voice. A shadow slid across the room, settling over us like a veil. Keisha lowered her voice to a whisper. "And that fear, it only gets worse in the next part." Keisha's last words settled over me like a cold cloth pressed to the back of my neck. Scared of him. That truth didn't excuse anything Jalen had done, but it told me what kind of grip Reginald Dawson had wrapped around my child's throat. I stood there a moment longer, breathing through a storm no mother prepares for. Then I straightened my shoulders. I couldn't break. Not yet. I slipped my keys back into my purse, thanked Keisha with a steady nod, and walked out of her office with the weight of 2 lives sitting in my chest. Nia's and Jalen's. By the time I reached my car, I already knew what my next move had to be. I couldn't confront anyone. Not yet. Rage would only warn them. Pain would only expose me. I needed to move like quiet water, steady, controlled, unnoticed. I drove straight to the store, filled a small bag with scented candles, a comfort blanket, and a little care basket. Something that said, "I'm thinking of you," nothing more. Something that would never hint I had heard the kind of conversation that dripped murder. When I pulled up to Jalen and Nia's apartment, I practiced my smile in the rearview mirror until it held still. My legs felt heavy walking up those steps, but I kept my steps soft. Normal. Loving. Nia opened the door on the second knock, her eyes widening with surprise she couldn't fully mask. She looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders tucked in, cheeks slightly hollow, skin dim around the edges. Her smile tried its best, but didn't reach anywhere near her eyes. "Mom, you didn't tell me you were coming," she said, stepping aside to let me in. I held up the little bag with a soft grin. "Just brought a few things. Thought you could use some comfort items. Baby." Her face shifted, gratitude mixed with something she tried to swallow before it rose. "Thank you. Really thank you." Inside, the air felt different. Heavy. Not toxic, but drained. Like someone had left a window cracked during winter and forgotten to close it. A blanket was thrown across the couch, crumpled in a way that said she'd been curling into herself for hours at a time. There was a cup on the table, only half-finished tea, and her phone face down like she was avoiding it. She tucked one strand of hair behind her ear, but her hand trembled slightly. That was the first sign. The second came when she reached for the bag I held. Her sleeve shifted just enough for the light to catch the underside of her wrist. A faint bruise. Oval-shaped. Fresh. My heart lurched, but I kept my expression warm, the same way you keep a candle flame still even when the wind pushes against it. I handed her the bag and let my eyes drift away from her wrist before she noticed I had seen it. You look tired, I said gently, placing the blanket on the couch. Are you getting enough rest? She hesitated. Not long, but enough for truth to flicker in her eyes before she smothered it with a small nod. Just adjusting to everything. Marriage is a lot. That wasn't exhaustion. That was fear wearing exhaustion's face. She guided me to the couch, hands twisting at the ends of her sleeves, now like she wanted to hide something beneath them. I let her sit first. The silence between us felt fragile, like stepping across thin ice. When's Jalen getting back? I asked lightly. She swallowed hard. Not sure. He's been out a lot since we got back from the wedding. Meetings with his father. Late nights. She bit her lip before continuing. He says it's business. A shadow crossed her expression, quick but deep. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. Nia, baby, are you all right? Her throat worked as she tried to swallow words that wanted to rise. Her gaze shifted from me to the window, like she was checking if anyone might hear. Then she leaned closer. Her voice came out small, thin, breaking on the edges. I think my husband is hiding something from me. Nia's whisper hung between us like a fragile thread. Her fingers clutched the blanket I'd brought her, knuckles pale, eyes wide with a fear she was trying to swallow. I didn't press her. Not then. I simply placed a hand on her knee, let her feel steadiness, and stayed until she relaxed enough for her shoulders to drop. But when I left her apartment that evening, something in me felt permanently altered. Walking to my car, I moved through the air like a woman holding an open flame, careful not to let the wind blow it out. I drove home slow, chest tight, hands trembling only when I knew no one could see. By the time I stepped into my living room, the silence felt too loud. The framed wedding portrait still sat on the console, but now it pulsed like a warning instead of a memory. I stood in front of it for a long moment, my eyes drifting from Nia's soft smile to Jalen's stiff posture, then to Reginald Dawson's shadowed expression. A quiet disgust stirred in my stomach. I needed answers. Real ones. Ones no one could hide from me. I walked to my bookshelf and pulled out the small silver drive where I'd saved the wedding videos. Every clip, every angle, every moment the photographers sent me, I backed them all up that night. Back then, it felt like sentimentality. Now, it felt like survival. I sank onto my couch, plugged the drive into my laptop, and clicked the first video that had a view of the reception floor. The room illuminated on my screen. Laughter, lights clinking glasses, happy chaos. I watched it not as a mother reliving a ceremony, but as a woman searching a crime scene. 5 minutes in, nothing unusual. 7 minutes. 11. Then my breath stilled. 14 minutes handwritten in the corner of the footage. 14 minutes where Jalen and Reginald weren't beside their family tables. 14 minutes where they slipped out of frame completely. I leaned closer. At the 9-minute mark, I saw Nia standing in the center of the dance floor. The DJ had called for newlyweds to slow dance. She looked around, smiling expectantly, but Jalen didn't appear. The camera even followed her for a moment as she laughed awkwardly with the bridesmaids, pretending not to feel abandoned. My chest tightened painfully. She'd been left alone on her own wedding dance. I rewound the footage, then slowed it down, then froze it at the exact moment the camera panned across the far left corner of the hall. There, Barely visible behind the stage drapery, two shadows slipped away in sync. One taller, broader, one nearly the same height as my son. Their movements matched too smoothly to be coincidental. The drapery swayed slightly as they disappeared behind it. I clicked to another angle, one taken by a guest who loved recording everything. Her camera was shaky, but it captured moments the professionals missed. When I paused at 12 minutes and dragged the screen brightness up, I caught a blur of movement behind a column. Two figures leaned into each other, heads near touching, bodies angled inward, close in a way that sent a hot coil of rage through my ribs. I needed something clear, something that wouldn't hide behind shadows and cloth. I opened the last video file, the one shot near the drink station where the mirrored wall reflected half the room. As the camera swept around, a faint glimmer caught my eye, a sliver of glass, a reflection behind the dessert table that would have gone unnoticed if I weren't looking for it. I paused the video, zoomed in, adjusted contrast, and there they were, Jalen and Reginald, pressed close behind the stage decor, close enough for my stomach to twist, close enough for my breath to slip away, their bodies angled together, their faces too near, their expressions heavyweight up with something I wasn't ready to put words to. Even through a reflection, the truth was unmistakable and devastating. My fingers hovered over the trackpad, numb with cold fury, when the video glitched slightly, just enough for their forms to shift half an inch. But the closeness remained, the secrecy, the hunger, the alliance. It tightened around my heart like a fist. That was the moment I knew I had crossed from suspicion into certainty. And the moment I thought nothing else could shock me tonight, the reflection caught a second flicker, Reginald gripping Jalen's wrist, pulling him deeper into the shadows behind the arch. My breath locked in my throat. I kept staring at that frozen reflection long after my eyes began to burn. The shape of their bodies, the angle of Reginald's hand on Jalen's wrist, it stripped something raw inside me. I closed the laptop slowly, the air in my living room heavier than it had been hours earlier. Every breath felt like it had to fight its way out. But I couldn't sit with the shock. Not anymore. Not after what I'd seen. Not after what I had heard. Nia's whisper earlier replayed in my mind. The tremble, the uncertainty, the pain tucked behind her eyes. If fear was already blooming in her, then whatever was happening in that marriage wasn't just secretive. It was bleeding into her spirit. I grabbed my purse again. I needed to see her, not as a visitor bringing gifts, as a mother trying to understand the cracks forming in her daughter-in-law's life. When Nia opened the door this time, she looked even smaller than she had earlier, like the hours between my visits had drained her instead of restoring her. Her hair was tied back loosely, her eyes rimmed with pink, as if sleep hadn't been her companion. "Mom, you came back," she said softly, stepping aside. I walked in without hesitation and closed the door gently behind me. "Baby, sit with me a little. There's something I've been meaning to ask." She hesitated, then nodded and sank onto the couch. The blanket still lay there, creased, held tightly earlier, abandoned now like it had failed to give her comfort. I sat beside her, close enough for warmth, far enough not to crowd her. "You and Jalen just got back from the honeymoon." I began slowly, keeping my tone gentle. "How was the trip?" Her shoulders stiffened. Barely, but enough for me to see. "It was all right," she said quietly. The hotel was beautiful. The food was good. The beaches were nice. None of that touched her eyes. I softened my voice further. Did you both have time together? Time to settle into everything. Nia let out a breath that wavered in the middle. We were supposed to, but Jalen, she rubbed her palm against her thigh. A nervous motion. He kept taking late-night calls with his father. Meetings, he said. Important things they needed to sort out. My pulse tightened. Late meetings? Yes. Almost every night, she murmured. They would talk outside, whispering, sometimes for hours. Her voice dropped, and he slept in the guest room twice. Said he needed to think. Her fingers trembled. I took her hand gently, squeezing lightly. She flinched, not violently, but enough for a mother's heart to notice it like a bruise. I loosened my grip immediately. She forced a small smile. Sorry, I'm just on edge. You don't need to apologize to me, I said softly. Her eyes glossed, the confession rising but tripping on her tongue. He wasn't mean, but he wasn't with me either. He seemed distracted, cold. He barely looked at me during the trip. Sometimes I felt like I was sharing a room with a stranger. She paused, pulling her sleeve down subtly, too subtly, as if hiding something again. Whenever I asked what was wrong, she continued. He just said he had things on his mind, important things, and he couldn't talk about them yet. The room grew still around us, as if every piece of furniture leaned in to hear the truth she was trying to hold inside her ribs. I tried to keep my tone light. Did anything else unusual happen while you were away? She inhaled sharply, her eyes darting toward the small table where her phone sat face down. A shadow crossed her expression. Fear, confusion, and something like betrayal. There is one more thing, she whispered. She picked up her phone, turning it over slowly in her hands. My grandfather's lawyer has been calling me for days now. I haven't answered because I thought it was a paperwork thing I could handle later. Her breathing grew shaky, but today he left me a voicemail. She swallowed. He said someone is requesting access to my trust. She looked up at me, her voice thinning into a trembling confession. But it's not me. The moment Nia whispered those last words, the room felt smaller, tighter, like the walls understood something dangerous had finally been spoken aloud. Her fingers shook as she gripped the phone, and I reached out slow, careful not to startle her. The voicemail still sat there, waiting like a bruise untouched. I'll handle this, I told her softly. Let me speak to him first. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to argue, but fear softened her into silence. Her shoulders sank in relief. I stayed with her, just long enough for her breathing to steady again, then kissed her forehead and slipped out the door. The night air felt colder than it should have. Every breath left a trail of frost inside my chest. On the drive across town, my mind moved in sharp lines. Images, recordings, bruises, whispers, all pointing to the same ugly truth. I didn't bother calling ahead. If the lawyer had been trying to reach Nia urgently, he would talk to me. His office sat inside a repurposed brick building on the edge of downtown, the kind of place where old money liked to hide its legacy behind quiet doors. A single lamp glowed behind the frosted glass when I knocked. It flickered once before the door opened. Attorney Vernon Hale stood there, an older man with silver hair combed back neatly, his suit pressed but worn with years of use. His expression shifted the moment He saw me. "You must be Mrs. Fields," he said, stepping aside. "I've been expecting someone to call. Come in." He led me inside, closing the door with a soft click that felt final. Papers lay scattered across his desk, organized in the tidy chaos of a man who'd spent decades battling greed disguised as family. "I won't waste time," he began, lowering himself into his chair. "Something is deeply wrong. Your daughter-in-law's trust has triggered multiple alerts over the past month." I sat across from him, hands folded tightly in my lap. "Alerts?" He nodded. "Requests. Unauthorized ones. Persistent ones." He reached for a file thick with documents. "Reginald Dawson has attempted to access her trust for the past 5 years. He never succeeded because legally he has no standing. Every attempt was rejected." My jaw tightened. That part I already knew, but hearing it from him made the truth heavier. After the engagement, Hale continued, his efforts changed. More aggressive, more entitled, as if he believed marriage gave him privileges. His lip curled slightly, the closest thing to disgust I'd seen in a lawyer. He opened another folder, thinner but fresher. "But what concerns me most is what happened 3 weeks before the wedding." He slid a scanned document toward me. I leaned in. A signature request. Generic at first glance, but the handwriting. My chest squeezed. Jalen's handwriting. Except the strokes were too clean, too practiced, too guided. Hale watched my reaction closely. This request pretended to come from Nia, but the note attached was vague, inconsistent with her way of speaking. And the signature at the bottom. He tapped the page. It's her husband's writing, attempting to mimic hers. My stomach dropped in a slow, sickening pull. Hale continued, voice steady but growing sharper. I called him to the office. He avoided meeting me. Then I received a voicemail from Reginald Dawson pretending to clarify the request on the couple's behalf. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. "I've dealt with men like him before. Charming on the outside, calculated underneath." He reached into the drawer and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the desk. "Before Nia's grandfather passed, he left me a private message for her. A warning." I opened it. One line, handwritten in a shaky script. "Protect her from greedy men, especially the ones wearing smiles." My breath left me in a slow, trembling exhale. Hale wasn't done. He pulled one final paper from the folder, a copy of a second trust request. "This came in days after the wedding," he said, "and this time the signature is definitely your son's. But the handwriting guiding the corrections, straightening the strokes, adjusting the loops, that belongs to someone older, someone practiced." He pointed to the faint second imprint layered over the signature. Someone taught him exactly how to forge her name. The room tightened around me as the truth clicked into place, cold and sharp. Hale looked straight into my eyes. And based on every pattern I've seen, that someone was Reginald Dawson. I sat frozen in Attorney Hale's office, the forged signature still trembling between my fingers. The weight of everything, Reginald's reach, Jalen's obedience, Nia's growing fear, pressed down on my lungs until breathing felt like work. Hale watched me quietly, his eyes softening with the kind of sympathy men reserve for mothers facing truths they never asked to hold. Before he could speak again, my phone buzzed. "Keisha." Her message appeared in 3 frantic bursts. Mrs. Fields, I found another file. You need to hear this one right now. Call me as soon as you're alone. A coldness slid down my spine. I stood, thanking Hale with a tight nod before stepping into the hallway. The moment the office door closed behind me, I dialed her number. She answered on the first ring, breath shaky, voice trembling just like the night she first called me. Ma'am, I sent it to your email. You need to listen where nobody can hear you. My throat tightened. What is it this time? Her silence was enough to chill the air. It's the second recording, she whispered. The one I told you I found late. I didn't want to play it at first. Her voice thinned. I think they were planning the exact moment she would die. I didn't wait. I ended the call, hurried down the stairs, and sat in my car with the door locked. My hands shook as I opened the audio file. Static. A shuffle. Then Reginald's voice, calm and controlled, slid through the speakers. We'll be at the cabin in 2 weeks. Secluded roads. She won't expect anything. My nails dug into my palms. Jalen's voice followed, hesitant, barely above a whisper. And what exactly are we doing? Reginald exhaled slowly, impatiently. It's simple. I tampered with the brake line on the last visit. One push too hard going downhill. And that's it. The breath left my body in a sharp, painful pull. He continued, almost casually, the car will hit the guardrail and drop off the embankment. The road has a record of accidents. No one will question it. A spike of nausea rose in my throat. Then Jalen, my child, my first breath, my boy, spoke with a tremor. Dad, I don't. Listen to me. Reginald snapped. She'll be relaxed. You'll offer to drive. That's when it needs to happen. My chest tightened. Nia's voice from earlier echoed in my mind. Jalen keeps saying he wants to drive on our next trip, so I can relax. At the time, I brushed it off as a sweet gesture. Now it sat in my stomach like a stone. The recording kept going. Jalen, she trusts me. Reginald, exactly. Use that. A chair scraped. Something slammed, faintly. Then Reginald's voice dropped to a chilling whisper. You want to inherit, don't you? This is the cleanest way. No struggle. No suspicion. Silence followed. A long, trembling silence where my son seemed to be holding his breath. Then Jalen whispered, almost broken, I need time. Reginald's reply cut like glass. Time is how people get caught. My heart hammered against my ribs, so hard it hurt. My hands shook violently, the phone slipping slightly as the audio ended. Another message from Keisha arrived almost instantly, as if she could feel the moment the recording hit me. Ma'am, I didn't want to tell you over the phone, but I have to. If she goes on that trip, she won't return alive. The car felt too small for the fear filling it. My breath came shallow, fierce, trembling. I looked toward the road ahead, but I didn't see the street. I saw Nia's sweet smile. I saw her bruised wrist. I saw her exhaustion. I saw her trust. I saw my son walking behind a man whose soul was colder than ice. And I understood something with devastating clarity. If I didn't move now, that cabin trip would become her grave. I sat in the car for what felt like minutes stretched into hours, the last line of Keisha's message burning through my skull. If she goes on that trip, she won't return alive. The words pulsed under my skin until they found something ancient in me, something fierce, something unbreakable, something that woke up fully for the first time. I wiped my face, steadied my breath, and pulled out my phone. Attorney Hale answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Fields." "Freeze the trust," I said, voice low, steady. "Immediately. Every account, every document, every point of access. Nobody gets in. Not even my son." His silence told me he understood the gravity without needing details. "Consider it done," he finally said. "By the time we hang up, the system will lock them out." "Send me confirmation," I replied and ended the call. Then I put the car in drive. I didn't go home. I went to Nia. When she opened the door, she looked even more drained than earlier, one hand pressed to her stomach as if steadying herself. "Nia, baby," I said softly, stepping inside. "Are you feeling all right?" She hesitated, closing the door behind us. I've been nauseous for days, dizzy, and I keep waking up with these pounding headaches." She pressed a hand to her temple. I thought I was just tired. Her voice cracked faintly. Something inside me twisted. "When did it start?" I asked. "Right after the honeymoon," she whispered. "But it's getting worse." I kept my expression steady even as alarm bell after alarm bell screamed in my chest. I touched her forehead gently. She wasn't feverish. She was worn down, depleted, like something inside her was slowly being taken apart. "Let me make you tea," I said softly. She nodded gratefully and moved to the couch. I walked into the kitchen. The moment I stepped inside, the hair at the back of my neck rose. Something felt wrong here. The air too still, the counters too untouched. Jalen's water bottle sat by the sink, perfectly clean. Nia's mug looked overused, stained, rinsed over and over. My eyes scanned the counters, the small shelves, the spice rack, normal, tidy, lived in. But when I bent to throw away the tea packet, something in the trash caught my eye. A small bottle, half hidden under paper towels. Its label peeled off. Some kind of residue dried around the cap. My hands tightened. I reached in with a tissue, lifted it carefully. It was light, too light for anything harmless. I opened the cap and sniffed gently, not enough to inhale, just enough to catch the faint medicinal smell. Faint. Chemical. Wrong. I slipped gloves from my purse, habit from years of dealing with sensitive documents, and sealed the bottle inside a zip bag. When I returned to the living room, Nia was curled into the blanket, eyes half closed, breathing shallow. "Baby," I said gently, "who usually makes your tea?" She rubbed her forehead. "Sometimes me, but lately Jalen's been making it. Says he wants me to rest more." She glanced at the mug. "Why?" My heart clenched. Just checking. I didn't tell her anything else. Not yet. Instead, I kissed her cheek and told her I'd be back in the morning. The moment I stepped outside, I called the one person I trusted with engines, chemicals, and truth, Leon, my old mechanic friend. "Bring it over," he said simply when I told him what I found. I drove to his garage on the outskirts of town. The lights inside flickered against the rows of tools and parts. Leon took the bag from my hands without a word and sniffed the rim, just the way I had, careful, experienced, cautious. Then his face darkened. "Gloria, this ain't no regular medicine." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" He unscrewed the cap again, wiped the residue with a cotton strip, and held it under a small diagnostic light. "This," he said slowly, voice tightening, "is a sedative compound. Low dose. Builds up over time. weakens the body, makes reactions slow, judgment foggy. My pulse hammered. He looked at me fully, eyes heavy. You give this to someone too long, and one sharp turn on a bad road. He exhaled. They won't survive it. Cold swept through me from the inside out. He held the bottle up between us. Whoever gave her, this meant for her to die. Leon's words echoed through the garage like a verdict no mother should ever have to hear. Whoever gave her, this meant for her to die. I felt something sharpen inside me, fear folding itself into resolve. I tightened my coat around my shoulders and stepped out into the cold night, the weight of that little bottle pressing through my purse like a loaded secret. By the time I reached Nia's apartment the next morning, the fear I'd tried to keep out of my expression must have slipped through. She opened the door before I knocked twice, eyes red, face paling the moment she saw me. "Mom, he's pushing for the cabin trip," she whispered. "He said we should leave tonight. He's insisting we need time alone. Tonight, not next week, not later. Tonight." The floor under my feet felt unsteady, but I held on to the doorframe to stop my hands from trembling. "Where is he now?" "Out with his father," she said. "He told me to pack before he gets back." I walked in, closing the door behind us slowly. She must have seen something harden in my face because her lips began to tremble. "Why does it feel like something bad is coming?" she whispered. I cupped her cheek softly. "Because something is coming, but it won't touch you. Not while I'm here." Her breath cracked. I told her to sit. Then I grabbed her keys, slipped out to the parking lot, and opened the hood of their car. The engine still held warmth from earlier. Jalen must have driven it before leaving. I clicked on the flashlight app and kneeled to check the undercarriage. At first glance, everything looked normal, but I'd learned long ago not to trust first glances. I crawled deeper underneath, the cold concrete biting into my palms. Then I saw it, a thin, unnatural scratch line across the brake hose. Not a tear, not a break, a thin incision, the kind that widens only under pressure. My stomach lurched. I dialed Leon. "Come now." He arrived within minutes, tools in hand, and slid under the car without greeting me. He stayed quiet for a long moment. Then he scooted out, face grim. "Brake line's been weakened," he said. "On a steep road or sharp turn. They'd fail. Looks like it was done days ago." My chest tightened. Leon wiped his hands. "I can disable the whole car. It won't even start." If he planned on driving her tonight, he's going to have to face a different set of problems instead of the ones he wanted. "Do it," I said. He pulled the battery relay, disconnected a critical fuse, and checked the line again. "Car's dead. They could kick it all day. It won't move." I exhaled shakily. "Thank you." He squeezed my shoulder. "Whatever storm you're in, Gloria, hold your ground." I nodded, clutching the bag with the sedative bottle inside. When I returned upstairs, Nia was sitting on the floor, back against the couch, knees pulled to her chest. Her breath came in soft, desperate hiccups. "He told me last night." She whispered. "He said the cabin would be good for us." But the way he looked at me, I didn't feel safe. I sank beside her, pulling her into my arms. She sobbed quietly, her tears hitting my shoulder like drops of something heavier than water, something closer to truth. "You're going to be all right," I told her. "Everything that's been hidden, I'm bringing it to light." She leaned into me, shaking. Why is he doing this? Why does he feel so far from me? What did I do wrong? I pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. Baby, this isn't your fault. None of this ever was. She broke into tears again, and I held her until the tremors slowed. Her breathing evened out, eventually soft and exhausted. I stood to get her water, my phone humming in my pocket. A message. I opened it. Reginald Dawson. Bring her tonight. We need to talk. My blood chilled. Not tell her to come. Not can we meet. Not we should discuss something. Bring her. Commanding. Calculated. Confident. He thought the plan was still moving. He thought she was still trusting. He thought I was still blind. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Tonight was supposed to be her last night alive. Reginald's message glowed on my screen like a threat wrapped in politeness. Bring her tonight. We need to talk. I stared at it until the meaning settled in my bones. He wasn't inviting. He was summoning. Confident the plan was sealed. Certain Nia would walk into whatever ending he and Jalen had prepared. But he wasn't counting on one thing. Me. I called Attorney Hale first. My voice was calm, but something underneath, it was sharp enough to cut metal. I need you tonight, and I need you to bring everything. He didn't ask what everything meant. I'll be there, he replied. Where? My house, I said, and bring someone who can stand between danger and the truth. He hummed knowingly. I have just the person. Next, I called Keisha. She hesitated before answering, breath shaky as always. But when I told her what was happening, she didn't refuse. I'll come, she whispered. I'll bring the files. Nia was the hardest part. She sat on the couch, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, eyes swollen from crying. When I told her we needed to confront them, together, her whole body stiffened. Confront. Her voice quivered. Mom, I don't think I can. I don't know if I'm strong enough. I knelt in front of her, held her hands softly. Baby, you don't have to be strong for them. You just need to stand beside me. I'll carry the rest. Tears filled her eyes again, but she nodded. We arrived home before sunset. I set up the living room the way truth deserved to be revealed. The documents went on the dining table, trust papers, forged signatures, the sedative bottle sealed in the evidence bag. Keisha's photos sat on the coffee table, face down for now. Hale arrived with 2 security officers, men who moved quietly like shadows with a purpose. Then came the knock. Hard, impatient. Reginald. I opened the door with a calmness even I didn't fully understand. He walked in wearing that polished smirk he used to charm rooms and silence weaker men. Jalen followed behind him, eyes darting nervously, shoulders hunched. They weren't expecting to see a room full of people, or Nia standing near the hallway, trembling but present, or Attorney Hale at the table, or 2 security officers flanking the doorway. Reginald's smirk faltered for the first time. What is this? A conversation, I said, about the truth. Before he could respond, Hale stepped forward. Mr. Dawson, Mr. Fields, please sit. The men didn't move. So Keisha, her hands shaking but her voice steady, set the first photo on the table, face up. Jalen inhaled sharply. Reginald's jaw tightened. Another photo, then another. The air stretched, taut, and suffocating. Where did you get these? Reginald demanded. The same place we got these, Hale said, clicking his tablet. The first audio clip played out loud, the whispering behind the reception hall, the kiss caught on camera. Jalen's face crumpled instantly, shame twisting him into something smaller. But Reginald stayed rigid, expression unreadable. Then came the second recording, the cabin plan, the brake tampering, the timeline. Every word echoed through my living room like a confession carved into stone. Nia's knees buckled. I caught her before she hit the floor. She sobbed into my shoulder, her whole body shaking as the truth carved itself into her chest. Jalen took one helpless step toward her, but the security officer blocked him with a single raised hand. "You don't touch her," I said, voice low and hard. Reginald turned to me, eyes blazing. "You think any of this will hold? You think you can ruin us with a few doctored files?" Hale stepped closer, voice calm, almost clinical. "These aren't doctored. They're authenticated. Everything is time-stamped and verified. And the forged trust request you filed." He tapped the paper. "A felony. Reginald's mask cracked. Just an inch. Just enough." Keisha stepped back, chest rising and falling too fast. One of the officers noticed and stood near her. Reginald snapped, "You little." He lunged, not at me, not at Hale, but at Keisha. She screamed. Security moved in one swift motion, grabbing him mid-stride, twisting his arms behind his back before he reached her. Jalen froze, horror washing over him as his father fought against the restraint. Nia clung to me, sobbing. And for the first time, I saw Reginald Dawson without the smile, without the silk, without the manners. Just a predator stripped bare. Reginald's roar still echoed in the room as the officers pinned him against the wall, his breath coming out in sharp, furious bursts. Jalen stood frozen in the center of my living room, his face pale, his hands shaking, not with fear for his wife, but with the dawning realization that whatever power he thought he had over this situation had never belonged to him. Attorney Hale stepped forward calmly, as though he'd watched men like Reginald unravel 100 times. "Gentlemen," he said to the officers, "take him." Reginald spat curses, but the officers tightened their grip, dragged him toward the door, and escorted him to the patrol car waiting outside. Jalen stared at the scene with hollow eyes, his world collapsing second by second. Minutes later, the detectives arrived, 2 of them. One approached me gently, notebook in hand. "Mrs. Fields, we received the files from Attorney Hale. We need to take statements from everyone." Nia clung to my arm as I guided her to the sofa. Her breathing was shallow, her face still wet with tears, and her entire body trembled. The detective spoke softly to her, careful, steady, letting her take her time. She answered every question with a voice that cracked but didn't break. Jalen sat across from us, head bowed, unable to look at her. When the detectives questioned him, he stumbled through fragmented admissions. "I didn't want to do it. He told me I had to. I thought he loved me." Words that revealed more about his twisted bond with Reginald than he realized. But then the investigation deepened. One of the detectives stepped aside to answer a call, murmuring into his receiver. When he returned, his expression had shifted from professional to something like disbelief wrapped in disgust. "We just pulled Dawson's emails," he said. "There's more here than any of us expected." Hale straightened. "More." The detective opened his tablet and turned it toward us. "He wasn't planning to split the inheritance with your son," he said carefully. "He was planning to cut him out." Jalen's head snapped up. The detective tapped the screen. Here, read this. Dawson told an associate he'd use his son to get access to the trust, then filed documents shifting control to a third party. Jalen whispered, No, he wouldn't. He told me, he said. But the detective kept reading. He called you, he pointed to Jalen, a necessary pawn. He wrote, the boy is gullible enough to play the part. Once the girl dies and the trust opens, he'll be dealt with. Nia gasped. Jalen's face drained completely, and whatever fragile denial he'd been holding shattered. Detective continued, voice calm but cold. He wasn't planning to split anything with you, Mr. Fields. He was planning to use you, then eliminate you the same way. Jalen's shoulders caved, his breaths turning into shallow, desperate sounds. He stood abruptly, stumbling back against the wall, palms pressed to his face. He told me he loved me. He choked, voice breaking. He said we were building a life. That he needed me. Attorney Hale didn't soften. He needed your access, your proximity, your youth, nothing else. Jalen slid down the wall, collapsing onto the floor, sobbing into his hands. Meanwhile, Nia wiped her cheeks and lifted her chin just enough to speak clearly. Detective, I want to file for protective orders. For myself. And for, her voice cracked, but she steadied it. Against both of them. You'll have them by morning, the detective promised. The investigation continued into the night. Officers moved through my home, gathering the photos, the sedative bottle, the brake line report, every grain of evidence. Nia sat beside me, leaning into my shoulder, breath trembling, but steadying with every passing minute. Then another detective entered the room, holding a thin file in gloved hands. His expression was grim. You need to hear this, he said quietly. We ran a national check on Dawson. I braced myself. He laid the file on the table. There were prior complaints, older ones, filed by distant relatives. All similar patterns. Manipulation, financial coercion. In one case, a suspicious accident investigation that was never completed. A cold draft slid across the room as his words sank in. Reginald had done this before, and he had been perfecting it. The detective closed the file softly. We believe this isn't the first family he targeted, he said, just the first one that survived. The detective closed the thin file with a soft click that felt louder than any explosion. Jalen sat on the floor, where he'd collapsed, shoulders shaking, his breath jerking in and out like it hurt him to. Exist. The officers whispered among themselves, gathering final signatures. Nia stayed beside me, her hand wrapped around mine, trembling but present. Then Jalen lifted his head. His eyes were swollen, red, almost unrecognizable. He looked at me the way a child looks at a mother after breaking something sacred. Fearful, ashamed, desperate. Mama, his voice cracked. I didn't know it would go this far. I swear I didn't. I stepped forward slowly, not with anger, something deeper. A heaviness that pressed against my ribs, demanding I stand firm. He reached for me, but I didn't take his hand. You didn't know? I said quietly. My voice stayed steady, but inside, something old and aching pulled tight. You didn't know after the bruises I saw on that girl's wrist, after the headaches and nausea, after you insisted on driving her on a trip planned around her death. His face collapsed. Mama, please listen. I stepped closer, my shadow falling over him. You didn't know after I found poison in your kitchen, After I watched Leon pull a sliced brake hose out of your car, after your father said the words, "Once she dies," right in your ear, a small, strangled sound left him. He hunched inward, hands pressed to his face, as if trying to push the truth back inside his skin. I tried to stop it. He whispered. I told him I needed time. I told him she didn't deserve it. I tried, "Mama." I knelt, slowly, deliberately, so he had to look at me, so he saw every inch of what he'd done reflected back. "You didn't stop," I said. "You participated." His whole body shook. "Mama, he got into my head a long time ago." His eyes flickered to the door, where Reginald had been dragged out earlier. "You don't understand what he did to me." "I understand enough," I said, keeping my voice from breaking. "I saw you call that man Dad, with more devotion than you ever called me Mama." His mouth opened, but the words couldn't escape. I didn't soften. "You were groomed," I said flatly. "You were manipulated. You were twisted into the shape he wanted." His breath hitched violently at the word groomed. It hit him like a slap, truth landing sharper than accusation. Tears streamed down his face now, fast, uncontrolled. He picked me apart. He choked. Made me believe he saw me, understood me, loved me. He said I needed him. He said you were too strong to need me. He said he could make me powerful. I swallowed, the burn rising behind my throat. He continued, words tumbling out between sobs. He made everything feel like a choice I owed him. Every decision, every mistake, it all led back to him. I never got out, Mama, not once. He didn't let me. My hands curled slowly into fists. "But you still hurt her," I said quietly. "You still could have walked away. You still could have told me. You still could have protected her." He shook with a grief that bordered on agony. I know, Mama, and I can't undo it. I can't fix anything." He leaned into me, forehead against my knee, sobbing harder. For a moment, just one brief, painful moment, I let my hand hover above his head. But it never touched him. This heartbreak wasn't the kind you soothe. This heartbreak was the kind you survive. The front door opened. 2 officers stepped in. Their expressions were gentle but firm. "Jalen Fields," one said softly, "stand up." His whole body went still. "Mama," his whisper was barely air. "Stand up," the officer repeated. Jalen looked at me, broken, hollow, aching, and forced himself to rise on shaking legs. His wrists trembled as they reached behind him willingly. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice splintering. "Mama, he ruined me." The cuffs clicked shut. His head bowed, and they led my son away. The door shut behind Jalen, the soft echo of the latch falling into a silence thick enough to swallow the room whole. Nia sat on the sofa, shaking, knees drawn to her chest as if she were trying to hold herself together before she disappeared into the cracks. The officer's footsteps faded down the walkway, Jalen's broken whisper lingering in the air like smoke. For a moment, I stood still, the weight of everything pressing toward my shoulders until it dissolved into a calmer, colder strength. I walked to Nia slowly and eased onto the couch beside her. She didn't speak. She simply leaned into me, forehead to my shoulder, her breath small and trembling. "It's over," I murmured. "Not everything, but this part, this danger." Her body softened, collapsing into a kind of relief that was painful to witness. I wrapped my arm around her gently, rubbing circles along her back the way I used to do for Jalen when nightmares folded him into himself. The detectives returned minutes later with final updates. Attorney Hale stepped inside with them, nodding to me before speaking. "Mrs. Fields, Nia, we've filed the formal charges." Nia lifted her head, eyes swollen but focused. Hale opened the folder, his voice steady and deliberate. "Reginald Dawson is being charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted homicide, fraud, coercive control, and long-standing financial abuse patterns. We're also attaching charges connected to the older complaints." The room tightened around us. "And Jalen?" I asked quietly. Hale exhaled. "As a co-conspirator and accessory. He'll be held separately." Given his statement and the psychological manipulation evidence, the court may take that into account, but he will face consequences. Nia looked down, tears falling silently onto her hands. The loss of her husband, the betrayal, the near death she hadn't even known she'd escaped, it all pressed into her at once. I held her closer. The officers finished gathering documentation, thanked us, and left the house in a wave of muted footsteps. When the last car pulled away, the silence that settled wasn't heavy this time. It was clean, a space scrubbed of danger, of secrets, of the dark hands that had reached for her life. Days passed. Reginald's arrest hit the news quietly. Powerful men always try to keep their sins tucked under the rug, but the police had enough evidence to ensure the story wouldn't fade. Jalen remained in custody, his psychological reports expanding thicker by the day. And Nia, she stayed with me. I cooked for her, sat with her, walked her through the kinds of nights where sleep trembled and refused to come. There was a softness in the house that hadn't existed before, a kind I never realized I had room for until she settled into it. She didn't call me Mom yet, but the way she exhaled in my presence told me the word was circling her heart. Attorney Hale stopped by a week later with a single envelope. It was sealed in wax, old-fashioned, heavy, carrying the weight of a man who had loved Nia fiercely, her grandfather. "I think this belongs to her," Hale said quietly. I took the envelope to Nia's room. She was sitting by the window, wrapped in a blanket, staring outside, as if the world was something she was learning to trust again. "Nia, baby," I said softly, handing her the letter, "this is from your grandfather." She blinked, surprised, then carefully broke the seal. The handwriting inside was shaky, the ink fading in places. She read it once, then once more, slower. Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't fall. They shone, suspended like something sacred. She handed me the letter with trembling fingers. I read it silently. "Protect yourself and trust his mother. She sees what others hide." My breath caught, not in pain, but in something deeper, something steadying. I folded the letter gently, placed it back in her hand, and met her eyes with a calm that rose from the deepest part of me. "This isn't the end," I said, voice low, unwavering. "It's the beginning of what they never saw coming.